Hi everyone. Welcome back to the Politics Show with myself, Council Premier, co-host Council Andrew. So today we're joined by Tasnime Akunjee, a lawyer who's been involved in the Shamima Begum case, and we before the break we discussed what could have happened, what could Tower Hamlets or other public bodies have done to prevent Shamima and her friends from going abroad to Syria. In this section, we're going to discuss, now that we've discovered that Shamima and her friends have gone abroad, what could Tower Hamlets Council, other public bodies have done proactively to get them back, or to learn and prevent other girls from having the same fate as them. So, Tasneem, that's when you got, that's when you sort of like got involved, 2015. From that experience, what's your opinion of the reaction or the response from public bodies, especially local ones here?
Right. So, I mean, I got involved after a very serious mistake had been made, really. And the mistake was to televise this incident nationally. So it was the police who encouraged the families to try to go on the BBC and to say, put a call out for their girls to come back home, really. By that stage, though, they knew that they'd already boarded a flight to Turkey, not the families, but the police, and that they were already in Turkey. Now, the difficulty here is that in any situation like this, I will say that there are organizations and institutions populated by normal people like you and I, and they will, those people are not insensitive to the plight of young children going abroad and being caught up in this. But the difficulty is that where something becomes a high-profile matter, then those people are very limited in what they can do and how they interpret the rules that they work under. So in any situation where security, the security services are involved, there is a lot of latitude if there isn't a massive publicity event behind it in order to help. So though we found that afterwards, when we tried to use our normal sort of approach channels really for this sort of situation, that they were much more resistant to bending the rules or playing with one interpretation of the rules than otherwise would have been the case. And that was a serious failing there by the police really on the issue, particularly when they knew where they were, because really the only thing that could have been done at that point was to quickly get on the phone with the police, speak to their counterparts in Turkey, and effectively try and cooperate with as much information flow as possible and get the Turks mobilized to try and identify where they were. That was a critical time, and it was unfortunate the way it fell.
And moving on, after the fact, there's been a lot of debate around serious case reviews or the lack of not doing a serious case review. I've noticed one of the viewers has put in a comment that the issues around serious case reviews actually raised in the Ofsted report about Tower Hamlets. Tasneem, do you want to just, before I move on to Andrew, do you want to just talk about that? What was your, did you ask for that?
Yeah, so a serious case review really is an examination really of the different parties involved in a serious situation. In this case, police, school, local authority, and maybe social services. But it examines where there were failures, where there was a failure, and where that blame is apportioned. It's not really about apportioning blame. It's more about finding where is there a problem, can we fix it? Now that is triggered usually when a child has died, or there's some evidence of abuse or neglect, and there's been some serious harm. Serious harm suspected. Now, where that takes place in the context of somebody who's been radicalized, well, in other scenarios where the local authorities do get involved, where they prevent or notified of a family that might be involved in some radicalization, then the social services will often get involved, and they'll say, look, this radicalization, that is emotional abuse, a definition of emotional abuse, and therefore they then act by trying to get the children into the family courts, make them wards of court to protect them from the influences of maybe radicalized parents. So it's well known that radicalization by councils, it's well known that radicalization constitutes emotional abuse, and that can constitute serious harm, and therefore a serious case review should be triggered in any of these circumstances. Now that wasn't done. We asked the Tower Hamlets Council, it was under John Biggs at the time, repeatedly to undertake a serious case review. Originally, we were met with silence. I then made an accusation directly in writing that John Biggs was either involved in a cover-up or in order to avoid the discovery of neglect with respect to this case. He responded by stating that a goal group meeting had taken place, which is usually what a police will set up, and that in that goal group meeting, a serious case review was considered and was decided wasn't necessary. My understanding of parties who were in that goal group meeting was no such issue was tabled. Recently, Mr. Biggs has said that he's received legal advice that suggests that a serious case review didn't meet the criteria for that to take place, really. And we'd be most interested to see that legal advice.
And Andrew, do you want to come in on that? Because I know that there had been interventions to prevent other girls from going to Syria. So some lessons have been learned, but the issue around a serious case review, why are we not calling a serious case review? And I just wanted you to comment on what you've heard based on your experience being there at the council during this time.
So I know this issue has been raised within the council as well as by myself in public and in private meetings. I know Councillor Rabina Khan has done the same. When I was leader of the opposition, I also would have meetings with the Director of Children's Services. So I'm pretty sure at some point we discussed this issue, because we actually did discuss some other cases. So I do have some information about, some other families that did come back from Syria. I also know, not directly, but indirectly, that, there were conversations with the security services. And I think one of the problems with this is, naturally in children's services, there is the need to protect the privacy of children. Though in this case, obviously, the girls have, now over the age of 18, and that really makes it really difficult to have these kind of conversations. And I think the other part of the problem is that you would normally do a serious case review when a child dies. And the problem is that we believe some of these girls are now dead, but there is no direct evidence of that as yet. So until we have direct evidence that they died, and of course may depend on the age of when they died, there is no formal trigger for a serious case review. But the reason why you do this is to learn lessons. And part of the problem is that there are lots of people involved in this, the school, the police, social services and others as well. And I know the relationships between the school, because it was an academy at that point. Social services were not great during that period of time for some other reasons. But for us, the Review and Scrutiny Committee, it's really important that we see evidence that the council has learned lessons from its mistakes in the past. And that's normally best done through a serious case review, because then you can see it documented, it's sort of led by an external person. And it may be they've learned lessons, but I have no evidence of that as a councillor and a member of Review and Scrutiny Committee.
Well, Andrew, I just want to come back on that. I know the format has changed, legislation or rules have changed behind serious case review. Can we still have a serious case review, in your opinion? Because people are asking for that. I've been on social media, I've been involved in discussions. There's the call for a serious case review is now becoming louder due to the fact that we won't be able to know the facts around Shamima's case, because she won't be allowed to enter this country. So how do we learn the lessons? So can we call a serious case review now, Andrew, in your opinion?
So I think it's the terminology has changed and the process have changed, but it's still fundamentally the same process. It's a way of trying to learn lessons from the past. And one of the arguments, so I'm not particularly keen that Shamima Begum return to the UK, to be completely honest, but one of the arguments of actually bringing her back to the UK is then the ability to interview her and talk to her and actually understand what happened to her, which then may explain what happened to the others as well. And I think that is one of the justifications for her return, is that we would learn the lessons. But it's only worth doing that if we actually do learn some lessons. And so far, my experience has been is that, we wouldn't pick up that opportunity. Maybe the security services would do, but it wouldn't filter down to us at the council or into the public domain.
Taz, I just want to come back to you. Do you think lessons have been learned? You've been involved since 2015. after the fact, what you're saying is you've been stonewalled in asking for answers to pertinent questions. The family has been stonewalled. What's your opinion? Do we need a case review? Have lessons been learned? It's not going to come out in a court of law now.
Well, no. I mean, in terms of Shamima's case, look, when she left, there were still 9 other girls who were in the school, and the council did intervene. The council then went in and they applied to court to make them wards of court, which did happen. So the problem there was, well, there were 2 tranches of people. There was the first girl in 2014, then there were 3 girls, all from the same school, who successfully managed to evade, detection and go over to Syria. It's only then that the council then decided that actually maybe we ought to get involved and at least put a stop to anyone else trying to go. So, well, what lessons does one need to learn? Well, a very simple one was, if there's a risk around a particular cadre of school children, you should tell their parents to take their passports away, or at least lock their passports up. It's a very simple step to do. It doesn't cost the UK taxpayer any money to do that, really. So did that happen in other cases? From other cases that I'm aware of, no. And it's one of the issues is how, because these things are police investigation led, they're sort of archaeological studies rather than actually proactive studies, where the police get involved and say, right, something horrible's happened, let's see who's to blame, instead of saying, let's prevent something horrible and let's see who we can work with in order to prevent that happening. And that may be one of the problems around the abdication of responsibility when there's a police investigation. So when counterterrorism police come into the scene, apparently it seems that our councils and our schools forget about their duties. They completely forget that they still remain in a position where they owe a duty to these kids regardless of who else is involved. And they just take the lead by the police. Now the police, of course, they have a duty of care, but it's nowhere at the standard of what the duty of care that councils and schools are meant to adhere to. And their interest is not about the individual themselves. Their interest is in detecting crime, gathering evidence, and finding a conviction. So these are opposite duties that different organizations have, and these need to be balanced properly. And more importantly, the councils and the schools need to assert their responsibility and duties, even when the police are involved.
I just want to read out a comment before we go into a break. A comment from Amy. Also, there seems to have been systematic issues when completing serious case reviews. 2017 Ofsted highlights this. The council has still not addressed the issue appropriately. Other SCRs have not been completed for children who met the criteria for a serious case review in Tower Hamlets. The mayor has been approaching regarding these serious safeguarding on multiple occasions. There are still issues in SCRs being completed. The Bethnal Green girls situation met the working together to safe. Andrew, do you want to just quickly comment on that before we move off to a break?
Yes, I mean, that's a good comment, because one of the problems is as councillors on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we only see serious case reviews at the end of the process. And unless we read the newspapers and know that a child died, for example, there's not information to us about the other cases out there. So just because we see a serious case review doesn't mean that we know actually that there were others out there that we should be aware of as well. And then the other problem we've had as well is the timeliness of some of these things is, by the time we see these things, it's like 2-3 years later, and therefore the opportunity to learn lessons is also 2 or 3 years late as well.
Cool. So we're gonna move off to a break now. After the break, we're gonna discuss the citizenship issue around Shamima. Again, could Tower Hamlets Council, other local authorities, be more proactive about it? So join us after the break.